everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 20 books that I would like to read before the end of 2020. I initially wanted to make this video around the middle of the year, like beginning of July, but alas, it is now August and I'm just getting around to filming it, so sorry about that. I've done this video twice before on my channel. Last year I also did it mid-year, and then the year before I did it at the beginning of the year, and when I go back and watch those videos, I did not read probably half of the books in either of those videos, and some of them actually might be making reappearances in this video, so I'm pretty ashamed of that because a lot of these books have been sitting on my shelves for many years now, so it's about time that I finally get around to reading them, and hopefully this year will be the year. Even though this year has not been the year for literally anything else in my life, it should hopefully be the year for reading. So because a lot of these books have appeared in a lot of other videos, and also because I have so many to get through, I'm not going to be going very in-depth into the plots of these books, which y'all know I don't really do anyway because I can't really remember what any of these books are about. So now that all of that is out of the way, let's just jump into the 20 books I would like to read, starting off with the two books I am currently reading. So the first one that we have is The White Queen by Philippa Gregory. This is a historical fiction novel, and I've been reading this for probably 3 months, and I'm on page 155. Hopefully I'll finish this before the year is out. And then the second book I'm currently reading, I've probably been reading for about 3 months, and I'm only 55 pages into it, and that is The Fellowship of the Ring. This is definitely like the one I'm most ashamed to not have read because I just love the Lord of the Rings movies so much, and I read The Hobbit a couple years ago and I loved that also. So why I haven't read this yet, I don't know, and I've attempted to read this book so many times, so I really don't know why it's so hard for me to get through, because every time I start to read it, I love it, but then I just like never pick it up again. I don't understand why that happens, but this year will be the year that I finally finish this book. So those are the two books that I am currently reading. Then I split up all the other books according to their genres, and I should also mention that these are just the books that I own that I want to read before the end of the year. I can think of 20 other books that I don't own that I'd also like to read, so the chances of me reading all of these is very slim, but we're just gonna hope for the best. So the next category we have is fantasy. First up, we have a Frozen 2 book, Forest of Shadows. I know this has been on another TBR video before, possibly more than one. I think this is just going to be like a little side quest adventure. It's written like a middle grade, so the font is really big. It shouldn't take me that long to get through, so hopefully I'll read this soon. And we've got 3 books in the Twisted Tales series, which you all know that I love. So we've got Conceal, Don't Feel, Part of Your World, and the one that I'm most looking forward to, Straight On Till Morning, which is about Peter Pan and Wendy, and this one sounds so interesting. Then we've got Finale by Stephanie Garber. This is the third and final book in the Caraval trilogy, and I know for a fact that this was in last year's video of the books that I wanted to finish before the end of the year, and I just didn't get around to reading this one because at this point it's been probably 2 years since I read the first 2 books in the series, and y'all know that my memory isn't good with books. So I really want to reread Caraval and what was the other one called? Legendary before I pick this one up, just so I can get like the full experience out of this book, and I just haven't gotten around to rereading those books yet. So you can tack on 2 more books that I'd like to read before the end of the year in order to read this one. Next we have Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is a book that I actually did attempt to read a couple months ago. I think I read like the first 2 chapters, and I just wasn't really into it because I definitely have to be in a certain mood in order to read fantasy. It's very strange how my reading has like evolved over the years, because fantasy used to be at like the top as far as my genres, and now it's like contemporary or thriller things are at the top now. So I definitely have to be in like a certain kind of mood to pick this book up. So when I had read it a couple months ago, or read like 2 chapters of it, I put it down with the hopes that when I get into a fantasy mood, I will absolutely love it when I read it, because it's also about, if you didn't know, like a magical library, which makes me want to read it and love it even more. And then the final book in the fantasy category is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I honestly don't really know if this is fantasy, but I'm just kind of assuming that it is, and I have heard so many good things about this series, so I really want to read it. I really like Jay Kristoff's writing with anything else that I've read of his, so I'm hoping that I will read it it this year and love it also. Then we have the contemporary romance category, in which I have only one book, and that is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. If you know my history with this book, then you know that I tried to read it probably 2 years ago. I read 100 pages of it, wasn't into it at all, and I DNF'd it with the hopes that I would pick it up at a later date and really love it. So I'm hoping that that will happen because, again, going back to how my reading has kind of evolved, fantasy used to be at the top where I could like read it anytime and really enjoy it, and contemporary romances used to be at the way bottom and I never wanted to pick them up. But now they're at the top, basically. So I'm hoping that now when I read it, I will really enjoy it and get my money's worth, because I bought this real fancy collector's edition with artwork on the inside because I was so sure that I would love this book, and then I went and DNF'd it like that. So I better read it this year, because if not, I need to get it off my shelf because it's just sitting there collecting dust. This next book, I actually don't know if this would be considered contemporary romance or not. All I know is it's a romance, but I don't actually know when exactly it takes place, and that is Message in a Bottle by Nicholas Sparks. I read A Walk to Remember twice by him, and I just recently reread it and absolutely loved it. So this is the only other book by him that I own, so I want to pick this up and see if I like this as well, and just kind of see if maybe he will be a favorite author of mine. So I really want to read this one, and honestly, the synopsis on the back does not sound interesting at all, but neither did the one for A Walk to Remember, but I loved that also. So hopefully the same thing will happen with this book. Next up we have classics, which I know is not technically a genre, but I only have one book for this category also, and that's Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I watched the movie of this, the Greta Gerwig version, and I absolutely loved it, and it totally put me in the mood to read the book. And if you watch that film also, you might recognize this particular copy of the book because it's supposed to be like a replica of the one that she makes at the end of the movie. So yeah, I am so excited to pick this book up, and I hope that I love it just as much as the film. Next up we have sci-fi slash dystopian books. The first one I have is Supernova by Marissa Meyer. This is the third and final book in the Renegades trilogy. I read the first two books earlier this year and I really enjoyed them, so now I would finally like to pick up this book before it gets to be too long and then I forget what happens in the first two, like we saw happen with the Caraval series. So yeah, pretty excited for this. I hope it has a good conclusion. The second book in this category, I actually don't know what this book is about at all, but just based off of his other books, I am going to categorize it as science fiction, and I think it might be a little bit dystopian-esque, but I honestly don't really know, and that's Next by Michael Crichton. So I read both of his Jurassic Park books, and I loved Jurassic Park, and I absolutely hated The Lost World. So I think this is going to be like the deciding book as to whether he's an author that I really like or not, or maybe I only liked Jurassic Park, the book, because I love the movie so much. So yeah, I don't know what it's about, but I hope it's good. Next up we have thrillers slash mysteries, and this first book is actually one that I plan to pick up next, and that's The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I've heard really good things about this book specifically, but also just about this author's work in general, so I'm excited to pick this up and see what her writing is like, and if maybe I'll be interested in picking up some of her other books. So I actually did read a little snippet of the back of this book before I started filming this video, and from what I understand, this is about a girl who gets a letter finding out who her biological parents are, and then she finds out that she has inherited their like estate or something like that, and I assume she's gonna find some like creepy stuff there. And one of my favorite settings in like anything are like creepy old estates. I don't know why, but I specifically really enjoy those, so hopefully I'll really love this book also. Next up we have The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This is another thriller slash mystery book, obviously, because I already told you what the category was, and from what I understand, this is just about a woman who I think like watches her neighbors through the window or something like that, so hopefully this will be as interesting as everyone else has described it as being. And finally in this category we've got Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is the first book in a young adult mystery trilogy, I think, and at this point all of the books have finally come out, so I can just binge read the series, because I bought this when it was first released, I'm pretty sure, and then I feel like I thought it was probably going to be a standalone, but like most YA things, it turned out to be a series of books, so I waited all this time until all of the books have come out so that I could just binge read the whole series, and this is another book that I've heard just so many good things about, so I'm pretty excited for this because it's been a while since I've read a YA mystery. Then next up we only have one historical fiction book, and that is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. This book takes place during winter 1945, so I'm pretty excited to pick this up because this is the first year that I've really kind of dipped my toes into historical fiction. Before this year I never really read it. And so far there are some books that I've absolutely loved in the historical fiction genre, and then there's some that I found kind of mediocre but I still enjoyed. So overall, like, all the historical fiction I've picked up, I've at least liked a little bit, if not loved it. So I'm pretty excited to see what this book will do for me. And then the final genre we have only consists of 2 books, and that is horror. This could also just be considered the Stephen King genre because he is the author of both of these books. The first one we have is Desperation by Stephen King, as I just said. This is a book that I picked up secondhand before I had even read Stephen King. Like, I knew that I was a fan of horror just from, like, watching the movies and stuff like that, so I assumed that I would probably enjoy Stephen King's writing, but I picked this up secondhand purely based on the cover. Like, there were so many other Stephen King books that always show up at secondhand shops, but this book specifically caught my eye because of the cover. I think you can understand why. And even on the back, there's just like a little cutout with a creepy little creature right there. So I'm really excited to pick this book up. It's very big, which, you know, isn't odd if you've ever seen a Stephen King book. Speaking of big Stephen King books, the final book on my TBR that I would like to read before the end of 2020 is It. I picked this up the other day at Barnes & Noble. This book is so big I feel like I have to hold it with 2 hands. It's over 1,000 pages, and I honestly don't remember the last time I read a 1,000+ page book. I actually don't know if I've ever read a 1,000+ page book, so this might be a first for me, but I'm so excited to pick this up, hopefully in October. I never watched the new movie adaptation of it, although I hear that both of those films are really good, so hopefully I'll watch them sometime soon. But I was a pretty big fan of the original It adaptation, so yeah, if you couldn't tell, I am super excited to read this book. I honestly cannot wait. So those are all of the books on my TBR. Leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and which ones you think I should get to first and prioritize on my list. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
Samson?